At some point, something along the way convinced us that there is a version of us that will make everything easier, that is ready for everything, not perfect, just ready to take on every task that you currently cannot, ready to wake up early without any sort of resistance, or ready to focus without procrastinating or drifting, ready to speak clearly in front of anyone you need to, and act decisively and follow through without negotiating with yourself every single time. And until that version of you shows up, you decide to wait for it. You decide to wait for the perfect moment, decide to wait for the perfect version of you to come. And you don't call it waiting. Instead, what you call it is preparing. You tell yourself that you're going to get there eventually, and that something is forming quietly in the background. And one day, that something will finally click, and you'll finally become that person that you've been waiting to become this entire time. That person who can do what needs to be done. But if you look closely, nothing is forming. All you're doing is postponing action until that action feels like it's a natural process, until it feels aligned with yourself, until it feels like something that you would do without any sort of effort or without any sort of discipline. And that is the mistake, that is the trap, that is the lie. You're waiting for a version of yourself that you are yet to build. You're waiting for a more disciplined version without having the discipline to build the more disciplined version. It's not a hidden version, it's not a delayed version, it's not on its way. It just doesn't exist. That's the blunt truth behind it. There is no future moment where discipline arrives fully formed and installs itself into your behavior on one day. There's no version of you that is coming to rescue you from the friction that you are currently feeling. The friction is the work. The friction is what you have to do to become that version. People imagine that consistency belongs to one type of person only, that there are just individuals who spawn and operate differently, who wake up and just do whatever needs to be done without any sort of resistance or without any sort of uncomfortableness. So they wait to become that person, then before they start actually acting like them. But that person is the result of the action, not the cause of it. You don't become disciplined and then act. You act and then discipline comes afterwards. Discipline is what people call it afterwards from an outside perspective. What you're actually avoiding is not effort. What you're avoiding is identity conflict. Because the moment you act against your own current habits, something in you starts to resist. And it isn't a physical resistance. It's just a structural resistance. The version of you that exists right now is built around those certain patterns. It's built around how you spend your time. It's built around what you prioritize, how quickly you give in when something becomes uncomfortable to you. When you try to act differently to that existing version, it feels unnatural because it is unnatural. You're stepping outside of a structure that you've reinforced for decades and years. And instead of recognizing that as the process of becoming that person that you want to become, you interpret it as a sign that you're not ready yet. You interpret it as a fact that maybe I'm not disciplined enough to do this right now. Maybe I'm not the person I want to be to do this right now. So you stop and then you go back to waiting and you live in those same processes over and over for another decade to come. The version of you that acts without resistance is built through repeated exposure to resistance. It is not a prerequisite. It is literally the outcome. Every single time you avoid something just because it doesn't feel like you or doesn't feel like the existing version of yourself right now, you are reinforcing the version of you that avoids that thing. Every single time you wait for readiness, you strengthen the identity that requires the readiness. And slowly, without noticing, you build a person who is so good at almost starting and is terrible at actually doing the work. And this is where most people get stuck. This is where most people start to lose. Not because they lack the information, not because they lack the physicality, or not because they don't know what to do, but simply because they're waiting for an internal alignment before they allow themselves to act upon the information. They want their behavior to match their identity before they change their behavior. It sounds so stupid when you lay it out like that, when you put it on a platter. But identity does not lead. Identity follows. You do not decide who you are and then act accordingly. You act repeatedly, exposing yourself to it, and then you call that pattern who you are. And that's why the version of you that you're waiting for feels so convincing. That's why it feels like it's going to come. It feels like something that is just yet to arrive. Something that will eventually, take over your life and make everything so much easier without any sort of resistance. But it will never arrive. I'll be honest with you. It will never come because it's being avoided by you right now. Because building that version requires doing things that contradicts the current version of yourself. It requires moving without any sort of validation. It requires acting without any sort of certainty, continuing without the emotional reassurance that you're doing it right. And most people will never do that for long enough to allow anything to change. They stay in this quiet loop of thinking and then planning and then adjusting and then waiting and then thinking and then planning and yada yada yada. waiting for a version of themselves that would make themselves work easier, instead of understanding that the work itself is what builds that version of themselves that makes the work easier. It's such a loop. It's paradoxical when you think about it, because it's so genuinely like baffling how people think the successful version of themselves will allow them to become successful. You only become successful because you build the success. There is no clean transition to just becoming successful. There's no moment where you feel different and then start acting differently. The order is completely reversed to what people believe. You act while still feeling like the same person, and only later does that feeling begin to shift. And that is the part that nobody likes. That's the part that nobody wants to be real, because it means that you don't you're not allowed to feel ready first. You don't get the confidence before the action. You don't get the clarity before the decision. You don't get the identity before the behavior. You get none of these things first. They come after. They are not the prerequisites. They are the outcomes. You have to move first, and for a while it'll feel like you're pretending. It'll feel like you're LARPing. It'll feel like you're an imposter. You may get imposter syndrome. It'll feel like you're forcing something that doesn't belong to you. It'll feel like you're stepping into a role that you are yet to earn. But that is exactly what building looks like. It is not natural. It is not smooth. It is not aligned with anything. And don't believe the lies that people tell you, where everything has to feel right and it has to click into place before it actually is real. It's constructed. That's the whole point of it. That version of you that you are waiting for is not waiting for you. It is being built right now by what you do repeatedly, especially when it doesn't feel like this version of you right now. And if you continue to wait for it to arrive before you begin, then you will stay exactly where you are, convincing yourself that something is coming, yet it never will. And I don't hate to actually. I love to tell you the blunt truth, because without this, some people may have continued waiting for that version. So get the fuck up right now and start acting so that future version of you actually comes to fruition.